The shutters have been brought down early on this controversial Jack the Ripper museum in the East End this evening, and if the protesters gathering outside here tonight have their way, it will remain that way.
Well, I cannot believe it, after years of campaigning for women's rights, women's equality, that this place has opened. I mean, we got so far, and then this temple of misogyny that is selling this really violent produce and displaying violent images of women has set itself up as a museum. It's not a museum, it's just a sort of shop of sexist, misogynist, very violent tat.
It's supposed to be about the history of women in the East End, and what it turns out to be is a celebration of violence against women. Jack the Ripper, like a lot of other people, I was completely outraged. Now, one of the reasons I was particularly outraged because I'm a historian of the East End. I've written books, I take people on guided walking tours about the social and political history of the area. But that history is a very proud history of people fighting for their rights, standing up against injustice. There's no shortage of women to celebrate in the East End.
A spokesperson for the Jack the Ripper Museum had this to say: "The purpose of this museum, as stated in the original proposal, is to highlight the often overlooked history and untold stories of women in the East End of London. In Tower Hamlets, the female victims of Jack the Ripper have formed a significant and undeniable part of that history. There are many tours and attractions that exploit these women's stories, often unregulated and with an uncomfortable focus on the horror story rather than the women's stories. We felt that the impact on women in this period has never seriously been examined, and we intend to put that right." The museum is collaborating with local and national services for women affected by domestic violence and abuse to raise awareness as well as funding for women in need in the community. The protesters gathering outside the Jack the Ripper Museum this evening are adamant it must close, and in its place they'd like to see a centre celebrating the history of women in the East End. Protesters are adamant they will continue to gather outside this museum every day until it shuts.